Hi, guys. So welcome to your stress screencast. Not a screencast meant to stress you out, but to begin you on the journey of your personal practice assignment for this class, and hopefully something that you actually will find helpful. I tell my classes all the time that this is actually a bit of an honor system assignment. Now, granted, you have to do the discussions for it and the summary paper, but whether or not you actually do the practices is going to be up to you. I'm not in your home or with you, and I don't know if you're doing them. What I will tell you is that my students who have truly invested themselves in this assignment, I have heard things from, this has changed my life, to it has made my relationships better, helped my anxiety or my stress levels, made my grades better. I've heard that on more than one occasion. Tests better. So it's going to be your choice. And the more you engage and the more you invest in it, I promise the more you'll get out of it. So make that decision and make that choice and know that it is a commitment, and it is part of your assignment. So I hope you will take the journey with me. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to move myself down here into the corner. So we're going to talk about stress, but I want to sort of flip this on you for a moment. I don't call it, stress. It's kind of the mind of optimal living, shaping your brain for real success and happiness. So we're going to talk about neuroscience, and we're going to talk about how these practices link up to science and how stress, your body and your mind on stress and how that all works together. But when we're trying to get rid of stress, I think that what's really valuable to keep in mind, if we were together, I would ask the whole class, how many of you ever experience stress? And very rarely I might get one or two people who have raised their hand in years of doing this. And because we know this is part of being human. And so, bring myself back up here. The thing about this is it's not just about how do we manage or reduce or get rid of our stress, but what do we want instead? So ask yourself that. What do you want to instead of any type of stressful living or the stress that's in your life? And I'll get answers like a sense, peace and contentment and achievement and happiness or all of these types of answers. And so I'm going to start you with this little piece of information from positive psychology. And positive psychology is a field that is not about like being positive all the time. It's really about, instead of just normalizing, it wants to optimize. So it studies how do we optimize our experience of living and being human. How do we do that? It's not about putting on a fake face and pretending all is well when it's not, because that actually isn't the way. Being real with emotions and being able to face them and be aware of them and handle them is a big deal. Is a big part of it. But they do study how do we optimize our experience. And so one thing that they study happiness. And what they have found is if I was to ask you what percentage of your happiness do you think is determined by the situations and circumstances in your life? And that means whether or not you have a job or a relationship. I have hair coming from somewhere on me. The circumstances of your life, what percentage of your happiness is based on those? So you can think about that for a second. Come up with a number. I'll get everything from 90% to 30% but the answer according to positive psychology, what it posits is 10%. Only 10%. And they study this by looking at people that have had really great things that have happened to them and, or things that have happened that bring them unhappiness. And what we find is that people tend to come back to a state of happiness. And so they have a baseline. So that's actually, we have sort of a genetic set point for happiness. And that's one big part of it. Because we know really people that struggle that are happy, and we know people seem to have everything in the world and aren't. So it's not necessarily the circumstances in our lives. But some of it's genetic, which can be worked with things that we're going to talk about. And then the other, a big part of it, 40%, is what is called intentional activities. And that's doing things that make you happy. And I call those, but I also think of them as these personal practices. So that's how, that's going to be sort of an introduction to this idea. And as we go on, we're going to come back to that. But I want to start you off with, this is not just about what do you do for your stress, but how do you decrease that? But how do you increase the other? How do you do that? Okay. So we are going to start. All right, I'm going to put myself down here in the corner. So we are going to start with this lovely picture. Stress! What is it? What causes it? And what do we do about it? It's kind of what we are looking at here and part of it. So first of all, I'd ask you, is there any kind of positive stress? Is stress ever good? And I will get students that will say, yes, it is. And I'll ask how and why. And they will say, it motivates you. Get you up in the morning, off the couch, watching Netflix and eating Cheetos. So we need some of that. And it actually has a name, and it's called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. It's positive stress that keeps us vital and excited about life. Now, the big key here is that it sees challenges versus threats. We're going to bold that. So it sees things as challenges and not threats. Okay. Now we have acute stress is another kind, which is just short term, and it's experienced in response to an immediate perceived threat. Now that can be real or imagined. But if we're driving and somebody pulls out in front of us, that's a real potential threat. And so an acute stress is something that we experience in that moment as we have to deal with that. Daily stresses can be like this. Those of you crazy people who like to downhill ski, the whole thing is a little bit of that, right? Because you got to watch where you're going and not knock people over. Well, at least I do. I don't do it though. But those things that might put us in momentary moments of real, where we have to be careful. Now, road rage can be kind of an ongoing thing with that though. Chronic stress is what we have to worry the most about. It seems never ending and inescapable. It's constant and ongoing. It can be like a bad relationship or nonstop pressure. Sometimes semesters at school can feel like this, where it's one thing after another that you have to get done. And this is what our society sees a lot of. So is stress becoming a modern epidemic? Yes, I think so. And the reason I talk about this so much is that more and more is being found out about what it does to us. Now, there's also these good things. Stress can do good things when it's acute, and this eustress. We need our body to respond to acute stressors, and we need eustress to keep us going. And if we really saw things like this and kept it in that compartment, it would be great. But chronic stress, unfortunately, takes over a lot, and that's where the problems come in this modern epidemic. Estimated 90% of doctor visits are for symptoms at least partially stress-related. 90%. So, whatever it may be, it may be headaches, it may be, soreness in the body, it may be ulcers, it may be stomach or digestion problems, all kinds of things can come from different ways that stress impacts us mentally and physically. So chronic stress can influence depression, diabetes, heart disease, hypothyroidism, ulcers, obesity, and it goes on. And it's finding more and more and more that at least plays somewhat of a part in most things that challenge us physically and emotionally and mentally. So what is this stress thing? So we have this stress response, and you've probably all heard of this: fight, flight, freeze. There's actually a fourth called faint, but we're not going to talk about that. That is evolutionary, animals who play dead. But, freeze is that deer in the headlights, fight, flight. So it is an ancient survival mechanism. And so I want you to think for just a moment, when you're stressed, what happens to your body? So even if you pause this for a second without even moving on and think about that, what happens to you when you feel stressed? And I want to define stress as feeling threatened in some way. Okay? What happens? Well, heart rate can go up. Blood pressure can go up. We can get sweaty. We can get hot. We cannot think clearly. We become tense. I have students, our stomach, we get butterflies in the stomach. A lot of different things we can see. We can get, headaches, migraines, all kinds of things can happen. So, but what happens biologically or physiologically is that hormones are released, adrenaline and norepinephrine, and they're kind of buddy system here, and they do a lot of the same thing to manage these initial fight, flight, or freeze responses from in the body. Cortisol is also released when a part of our brain, the amygdala, determines something to be a threat. Then it releases cortisol, and all of these things begin to happen. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure increases, blood directed away from like the center of the body to the large muscles so that you can fight or fly. Also, blood moves from the skin, constricts away from the skin. Now, if you think about that evolutionarily, when people were hunting large animals and they needed to truly fight or fly for their lives, it would keep, if something happens, it keeps you from bleeding more. Pupils dilate, sweat increases, immune system is suppressed, and that's part of the cortisol thing. And why too much cortisol in our system over time is not good for us. It hurts our immune system. Our thinking isn't clear because we don't want to think before, when we were on the plains and there's a large animal coming at us, we don't want to think, what should I do? Or even today, if a car is pulling out in front of you, you don't want to sit and think, now, what should I do? You want to act. So the part of the brain that really gets in the way of those automatic responses is sort of shut down. So what it does well, it does really well. We need this fight, flight, or response. It's been around since mammals, came into being. It's been around for a long time. And I'm going to do this little thing here real quick because I do this for my classes. I think it's good to know. If you hold your hand like this and in a fist, and you imagine this is the brain. This is the brain in the hand. And this is like the spinal cord. And this is the brain stem, which handles a lot of our automatic heart rate, involuntary things that happen to us. We put our thumb here. This is the limbic system. This is the emotional centers of the brain. And it's really big in processing anger and fear. The amygdala, part of that is. We also have the hippocampus, which does a lot with contextual memories and is very tied to emotions, why we have certain emotions in certain contexts. And then when you do this is our cortex and our thinking brain. And so some of this came online with like lizards, mammals, and then, this has been growing and is the largest in humans. So we have the cortex, and right here, behind these front fingers right here, the prefrontal cortex has a lot to do with decision making, planning, also inhibiting those reactions. And when you see these together, we notice that they're all touching. So the prefrontal cortex is integrated with the limbic system and with the body systems, and they all work together. When we are under stress, when we consider something a threat, what can happen is we can flip our lid, it's called, and we lose that connection and that integration. And our limbic system takes over, and it's in charge, doing what it does, which is just reacting based on past experiences without thinking, reacting, just doing what it's always done in stressful situations, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But I want you to kind of think about the brain in terms of this and in the hand as we move along. So when we are in a truly physically threatening environment, this system works well for us. It does what it's supposed to do and what we have needed it to do for eons. So that's good. What it does that's not always helpful. The problem is, when's the last time you had to go out and hunt your food? Or, we do have those small physical stresses. Sometimes, yes, we do live in a physically threatening environment. We can, some of us. But in general, in our world today, in our society today, most threats are social and emotional. And they have to do with emotions and thinking and feeling. And the truth is that the brain still responds in the same way. So the smallest social emotional threats can feel just like physical threats, just like life or death. So, and the body responds the same way. And these threats, like getting up late, being late, running late, not doing well on a test or in a class, or having a fight with a significant other or a parent or a friend. And, these can go on all day. And when the body responds with this fight, flight, or freeze system, every time we feel somewhat threatened in some way, hurt, then we chronically induce these hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, constantly running through our system. We don't shut that off, which is what it was supposed to do. There is supposed to be this balance between the kind of the gas in the brake, which is sort of our nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is this fight, flight, or freeze, can handle this, and it puts the gas on and keeps us moving and motivated and doing something and acting. The parasympathetic rest and digest kind of slows that down and balances those systems out. And that's what it's meant to do. But the problem is we have our foot on the gas a lot in life. And so the body doesn't get the opportunity to recover the way it needs to with that parasympathetic nervous system. And that's why stress can be so difficult for us. Now, storytelling, I think, is one of the chronic things we deal with in our life and in our mind. Hold on. Sorry. I want you to consider this. All right, this is what I call storytelling. I'll come talk to you up here. Imagine for a moment that you hear about a party on Tuesday, and it's going to happen on Saturday. And on Tuesday, you hear that a particular person is going to be at this party. Now, this is a person that, for whatever reason, you have strong emotions about, either good ones or bad ones. And when do you start thinking about that? Saturday, when you're on your way to the party? No, probably not. Not most of us, in what I've found. We start thinking about it immediately. And so we spend 5 days of our life, going over scenarios, telling ourselves stories. Well, how am I going to walk in? What am I going to wear? What is he going to say? What am I going to say? What is she going to do? What is it? And we have like these stories that we go through, these both fantasies and these tragedies that we build up in our mind one way or another. And we're taking all of our mental and physical resources to create these stories. And we live in that place rather than where we're living. And then we get to Saturday and they don't even show up. And so then we've wasted all of that energy. And because the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's actually happening and our imagining of it, if this person makes you feel stressful and you think about it and you ruminate on that and the heart rate goes up, you can get that stress response system flowing in the body, turn the mind off without even being in the situation. We live so much in these stories that it can be dangerous to us, and it can be ongoing. Okay, so what do we do about this then? Well, one of the main things we do is we look to science for a moment, to something that we call neuroplasticity, which we actually talked about. And you watched the video, excuse me, with the monkey and the fingers. So defined as the brain is shaped by your experiences and thoughts. And so that's an important thing. The things that you're constantly thinking is shaping your brain. It can be reshaped with new learning. So there's an old saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together. So I want you to think of anything you've had to learn to do. If you play an instrument or a sport or learn a new language, anything you've had to learn to do. The first time you go to do that, all the neurons in your system, in your brain and your nervous system, involved in making that happen, fire together. And they create like a network. They wire very loosely kind of together in that first time. And the more you repeat it, the stronger that network becomes. And networks of neurons firing and wiring together repeatedly become hardwired habits. And that's why, as a child, the first time you went to tie your shoe, you had to think so much about it. And you had to do these little things, and those neurons are firing and they're wiring. But over time, you do it enough, it becomes automatic. Driving can be the same way. If you do a sport, any of that, something that goes from being really difficult to really automatic is because those neural networks that are hardwiring into a habit for the body and the mind. So how does neuroplasticity relate to stress? Well, stress reactions are wired into networks just like any other learning. So if the first time you experience something that feels threatening, with a friend or another human being, and they treat you badly, or they hurt you in some way, or even if they surprise you with this, then all of that, it gets wired. The emotional center of the brain wires that in to the things that are going on in the body, to the context of the situation, to all that's happening and your reaction to it. And then it just remembers that and files that away. Habits of mind and emotion often create habits of behavior. So a lot of times we think of habits as being things that we do, actions we take, like we bite our fingernails, or we smack our gum, or we smoke, or there's any kinds of addictions, become habits, and we think of those as behaviors. But a lot of times, if we were to go back far enough and really were able to pick it apart, those may have been created first from a habit of mind. So I'm nervous, I can't pass this. I'm terrible at math. I can't pass this. And then we start biting our nails, and somehow that creates a reward or makes us feel better for the moment. And all of a sudden, that habit of doing that is linked to that thought and the emotion of maybe nervousness or fear, of doubt, and then the thinking that we have. And so all of our habits of mind, body, and behavior become linked together. How we respond to stress, and we create coping mechanisms for our stress this way. I'm hoping this makes sense. It's all I can kind of hope, since I can't see you or hear you. So what's your stress habit? I talk about go-tos. So here's what I want you to imagine for a moment here. Imagine that you're walking down the hallway, and out in front of you, you see somebody coming that you have positive feelings about. Maybe it's a friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, or somebody you want to, interview for that position. And they're coming towards you, and you're preparing to say hello and be friendly or have a conversation. And you pass them in the hall. They glance at you with no facial expression and just keep walking. What is the first thought you have? If you have anything with you, write it down or keep it in mind. What is the first thought that came to mind? Now, I'll have students say, and so then I would ask you, what is the emotion that then comes with that thought? And then, what is the action that emotion and thought wants you to take? The immediate one. The impulsive thought, emotion, and action. So then when I go and I talk to students about this and we go over it, I'll get things like, it can range from, what did I do wrong? I must have done something. They don't like me. What's wrong with me? To what is wrong with them? And jerk, an idiot, and to, wow, did they not see me? What's going on? Confusion. So they can go from sadness, a feeling of being rejected, to anger, to confusion, to whatever. So there can be a wide range of responses people can have, and the actions can be, I had one student once say, I would go and just put my head down on the desk. And a real withdrawal. Another one who would go, hey, what's wrong with you? Another one that would be like, hey, are you okay? So a lot of different reactions based on that thinking and that feeling. And then I want to ask, okay, so if you were to stop a moment and think about it, what is at least one other possibility for why they did what they did? One other. It might be one you like or don't like, but it's just something else. So would a different possibility, because the truth is you don't know, but you have created stories potentially to explain their behavior. But you don't know why. And so if you even consider other possibilities, would it change how you would respond to it? Maybe, right? If you knew, especially. So this is another way storytelling can get us. But this is also our stress go-to, the way I talk about it. Do you see in yourself with that thought or that thinking or that thinking, that feeling, and that acting, do you tend to have a go-to of fight, flight, or freeze? Fight can be more of an anger. Hey, what's up? What's wrong? Now remember, this is a feeling of being threatened. So if you feel threatened by that, it puts you under stress. And that's when fight, fight, or freeze comes into play. So, anger would be more the fight one, needing justice or needing to, something, being mad. Fear or sadness can be flight and withdrawal, wanting to get away from the situation. Freeze is more of a helplessness and not feeling that there's any choices. So I talk sometimes about a lens of possibility. How many choices can we see in a matter? If we only think one way, if we only think one thing is possible to explain why things are the way they are, then we only have one choice or two choices. And that, in turn, creates how life shows up for us. So we want to sort of expand that lens of possibility a little bit. How do we do that? How do we come to maybe change our go-tos or at least be aware of them enough to choose about them, how we want to respond? So shaping habits and go-tos. You put neuroplasticity to work. But here are some little things to consider. Your brain does not care if a habit is good or bad for you. So it doesn't care. It shapes itself based on your preference. When you do something, bite your nails or smoke a cigarette or anything that you do, any coping mechanism or you react by getting angry or withdrawing, your brain doesn't care if that's good or bad for you. It just shapes itself based on your preference. And you show your brain your preference by what you've continued to do. But those things you've continued to do have somehow given you a reward or a payoff. It's lit up your reward system in your brain. And so now all of that is networked together and it just does it. The more often we do it. Your brain is shaping all the time, creating habits. And do you want to shape it unconsciously or consciously? That's what we come down to here. Do you want to use the knowledge of neuroplasticity to shape your brain in a way that is beneficial for you? Or do you want it to just go on shaping unconsciously? The key is choosing to create conscious habits. Now, those can be tough because you have habits that are hardwired and you're seeking to change those habits or create different ones. So I tell students it's not just about not having good willpower. It's about having to, build a new network when you already have one in place. And the brain likes to go to the easiest route, what it's always done. And so that's what it'll do 100 times. And so creating a habit has to be very conscious and it takes time. And I got in trouble with some students once for saying the term fake it till you make it. But what I mean by that is sometimes when we want to change the way we're responding to the world or to life, we want better results. We have to start doing things that we know are good for us, even when they feel unnatural. Until they feel natural. Understanding the brain is shaping, but it's fighting with these other habits. But it can be done, and that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. It can be done throughout the lifespan. We're not too old. It might get harder the older we get, so better if you're young, do it now. And deciding where we start to change our relationship with stress, we need to realize the one common factor in all of our stressful situations. Ourselves. We must choose to change our results and take advantage of neuroplasticity. Choose to create new habits. So how? How do we use neuroplasticity to consciously shape our brain? Well, the best way I know is mindfulness, which is being where you are when you are. So look down at your body. It's probably where you are. Is your mind still on this? A lot of times the mind wanders. 47% of the time our brain wanders. It's something it does. But it's bringing those two things back together. Mindfulness is one of the #1 scientifically researched ways to shape your brain consciously. It strengthens attention, and neurons fire and wire according to what you're paying attention to. So mindfulness will strengthen attention, and when you put your attention on what you want, on the thought processes and behaviors you want to continue, then it fires and wires more. Mindfulness is a habit consciously created through repetition, building circuits to support it. The truth is you can't control the stress response. It's automatic, but you can control the relaxation response. And that's what mindfulness does. So how does mindfulness shape the brain? I'm going to give you this briefly here. I know this looks like a lot, but I want you to have some of this scientific stuff. These are parts of the brain. The amygdala is in that limbic system, that emotional center. It's responsible for the stress response and fear and anger. Mindfulness activities have actually been shown to shrink it. So that means it's not as reactive, to actually shrink the size of the amygdala. The anterior cingulate cortex we'll talk about later in this class too, the ACC. It is responsible for it's involved in self-regulation, decision-making, attention, resiliency, and self-awareness. They found that 3 hours of mindfulness, not at one time even, but greater activation and better results in tests involving setbacks and distractions. Strengthening this area plays a role in anxiety and depression, in alleviating anxiety and depression. Left-right activation, what's been found in some studies is that positive emotion lights up the left side of the brain and negative the right side of the brain. Happiness, so we're looking at happiness and optimism. 8 weeks of mindfulness practice shifted the set points in the brain for left-right activation. So after 8 weeks of mindfulness, people were seen to have more left activation. The anterior insula. The insula is part of the brain that attaches, it has like a map of all the organs in the body, and it reads information from those organs, from the gut and the heart, and gives it to the brain as input to tell it, okay, we're under stress, we're under threat, or no, things are good. So the insula and the ACC together have a lot to do with empathy and compassion. And what we have found is that practicing mindfulness, greater activation in interoception, which is being able to read your body state and your self-awareness. And both are keys for empathy. The vagus nerve is the largest nerve in the body. It's a major channel for that parasympathetic, that rest and relaxation part of the nervous system. It starts in the neck muscles, so it helps the head to orient itself, so its attention. Coordinates breathing and heart rate interaction, so when breathing gets faster, the heart rate goes up. Helps control digestive processes. And research shows that it's got a connection to oxytocin receptors, so that's our love stuff. So it's the love nerve. So activation of it increases our immune response. When people are shown images of suffering or of inspiration, it increases the activity of this. So it actually increases compassion. Strong vagus nerve response equals more positive mood, relationships, happier. Mindful breathing activates, balances the stress response, and strengthens activation of the vagus nerve. So this is very physiological. This is very brain-based. So mindfulness is actually, this isn't just woo-woo stuff. Mindfulness is working on your brain and your body to bring it into balance, to better manage difficult moments. So what I want to do is I'm going to do right now a brief, you can do this with me. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to do a mindfulness activity. So if you want to do it with me, great, or you can stop this and ignore it. All right, so your personal practice assignment. You are to choose a mindful activity. There's a list of them in your syllabus, but they include things like mindful breathing, which is what I'm going to do in a moment, meditation. Problems with meditation that students have is the idea that it means that you're supposed to clear your mind. No, you're not supposed to clear your mind. You're just supposed to become aware of the activity of your mind and become aware that it's wandering and bring it back. That's when you build the muscle and you actually activate those things within the brain. Prayer can look a lot like meditation, contemplative prayer especially, journaling, yoga, and then there's a whole bunch of them listed in your syllabus. You're to practice 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Honestly, if you could do it every day, you'd get better results. Each week create a discussion post, an original post, sharing your experience, successes, challenges, and questions. I will put it up on the discussion for that week, what to think about and consider. Each week, create a reply post to classmates' original post, and offering understanding tips, ideas, or sharing stories. Again, you will see in the original discussion post how to answer to that, and then look in your syllabus for ways to think about responding to others. Write a summary. That's your personal practice reflection summary, which is one of your assignments. And then in moments of high stress, I would challenge you to, before a test, before you have to do an interview or a speech or a big event, stop, breathe, and visualize success. So I might put little screencasts out there now and then about other methods for mindfulness. Oh, another one that can be here, which has become very popular, and I should put in here, is the kind of adult coloring books that have come out, the mandala coloring and so forth. So those can be done too. All right, so you can either stop here because you need to get started. You will have a personal practice discussion post in your third week, so you need to do that. But before you do that, you need to choose what personal practice you're going to do. And so then your post for the first week, I'd like you to at least try it once before you do a post. You can talk about what you're doing, what you hope to do, your intentions for it, and kind of what you hope to get out of it, what you're nervous about, challenge, you know, when you tried it, what it was like, anything like that, but you can look at the discussion post for that. Okay? So stick with me if you would like to do the, to get an example of this. I'm going to go back up here. Okay. So if you're sticking with me, all I want you to do is put your feet on the ground, put your shoulders up, back, and down. Then I want you to tuck your chin just enough for your neck to be in alignment with your spine. So you're not doing this and you're not doing this, but you're just in alignment. It's just a gentle tuck. I want you to notice if your tongue is slammed up against the roof of your mouth, and just to relax it. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, please do. I'm going to close mine. If not, that's okay. And the first thing I want you to do is just become aware of all the sounds in your environment. All of them. The buzzing of the computer, anything that's going on. You're not trying to tune it out, you're trying to tune in. So for just maybe 3 breaths, be really aware of any of the sounds in your environment. Then I want you to become aware of every place where your body is touching the world. So your feet on the floor, your bum and your back against the chair. Notice where your hands are resting. Just become aware of the space you're taking up in the world. And then tune into your body itself. Internally, like your muscles and your organs, your stomach and your heart. Any place you might be tense, holding any tension. Just how you're feeling, how your body is feeling in this moment. And then I want you to tune into your breath. There are things in your environment or in mine that might pull your attention away from your breath. That's okay. Let your attention wander, notice it, and bring it back. And I want you to notice your breath moving in and out of your nose. You can maybe even see it as a color as it moves into your nose and through your body, filling the body. And as you exhale, more deeply relaxing into the chair, into the moment. And notice where your body rises and falls as you breathe in and out. Your belly, your chest. Just follow the rise and fall of your breath, like the flow and ebb of an ocean wave on the shore. If your mind wanders, you can name it, wandering, wandering, and bring it back. If an emotion arises, you can name that too. Anxious, anxious. And then return to your breathing. A popular one sometimes as we get started in these practices is bored, bored. That's okay. Just name it and return to the breath. Now return your attention to your body in the chair. To the feel of your breath on the nose. To the sounds around you. And wiggle your toes and your fingers and open your eyes. That's all it is. Just tuning in to the moment and what is happening at the moment. And tuning in without judgment, without trying to change it, but just name it. And then choose where you place your attention. A lot of that is about noticing that you can control where your attention goes. You can even imagine that there's like a flashlight back behind that forehead and that prefrontal cortex, and it's shining its light on things all the time. And that's how it's shaping the brain. So this is strengthening your capacity to attend to what you choose to. As your brain wanders off into its stories, it's okay. Storytelling, storytelling. Bring it back. That's the muscle flexing. Now here's the deal with practices. It's just like if you go to the gym and you stare at the weights, not much is going to happen. You have to pick them up and use them. If you want your brain to actually change, you have to do the work. 10 minutes 3 times a week is what I'm asking you now. You're going to teach your brain another tool for managing the challenging moments. And you're also going to strengthen it and your emotional responses at the same time. So, I hope you will join me, and I thank you for tuning in. Have a good one. Until next time.